It's Dice Throne versus Kapow in this beat-em-up episode of Little Big Thumbs. Welcome to Little Big Thumbs, a channel that's all about finding great games that are equally fun for little players and big players. My name is JP, and in this video we're going to be comparing two dice battling board games. Kapow from Wise Wizard Games and Dice Throne from Roxley. And before we go any further, I just want to quickly acknowledge that both of these publishers has sent us complimentary copies of their games for review purposes. Over the next few minutes, we're going to be offering a very quick overview of how the gameplay differs between these games, as well as offering 3 ways that the explosive fun emerges in contrast to the other game. And if you stick around to the end of the video, you'll find out why my 8-year-old Big Bean is only interested in playing one of these 2 games. So, let's go grab our best fighting dice and get ready to rumble. Okay. Let's start off this segment with the major similarities between these 2 games. Both games give players these dials to track health points, and the goal in each game is to reduce the health of all opposing players to 0. All of the action in each game is primarily driven by dice. We're looking to create combos and deal devastating damage to our foes, until only one superhero or villain is standing tall in victory. Each of these games is also relatively quick to play. With experienced players, 2-player games of Dice Throne often last about 30 minutes, and that's about the same length we can expect games of Kapow to run. Now, where these 2 games start to diverge is in the way they go about trying to achieve their gameplay goals. Now, we've spoken about Dice Throne repeatedly on the channel in the past, but if you're new to the game, this is an experience that's driven by cards and dice. Each player chooses a hero, and that hero comes with its own unique set of dice, and a dedicated deck of cards that is ready to just pick up and play. Once we're set up to play Dice Throne, players will use a 3-roll offensive mechanic that's similar to the classic game of Yahtzee. After each roll, we're keeping the dice we like and re-rolling the rest. After the 3rd roll, players will compare their results to the actions on their player board, choosing one to activate. If that action involves an attack, then the target player has a defensive roll to try to mitigate that damage or respond with a little punch back of their own. Games of Dice Throne will typically end when all but one player has had their health dial reduced to 0, leaving one player standing tall above the rest. By contrast, the dice in Kapow are all rolled simultaneously, in secret behind a screen. Those dice only get rolled one time, with limited options to re-roll individual dice. We're also assigning our dice to perform attacks, defend against incoming attacks, and execute special abilities all at the same time. And sometimes that means putting up a weak defense in order to deliver some major damage. Each round, players reveal their chosen actions, which are mostly resolved simultaneously, with no opportunity to respond to what's coming from the other players. Card play does not exist in Kapow. Instead, players have a stash of static trait dice, and they also start with 1 or 2 action dice. These action dice are modular and customizable, meaning that the actual sides of the dice can be removed and swapped to help you set up something epic for later in the game. In addition to attacking and defending, each character has their own unique abilities that can be triggered, and there are general power-ups that help us to build up a larger collection of dice more quickly. Turns are speedy, and the element of surprise is always on our side in games of Kapow, as we seek to submit our opponent by bringing their health dial down to 0. So that's a brief glance at these 2 explosively fun games. Now, let's go check out those 3 factors that makes each game stand out in their own way, and then we'll be back for the final battle of this Little Big Thumbs video. In Dice Throne, we're on our way to a landscape of over 30 playable heroes, including original characters, Marvel heroes, and even Santa Claus himself. Most would probably admit that Dice Throne is a 2-player, one-on-one experience. But it does have Team and King of the Hill modes to allow for up to 6 players to get in on the fun. And combined with that vast roster of heroes, that's a lot of flexibility. So let's compare that with Kapow, which only includes components that permits 2 players to play each game, and capping each volume in this way does seem like a little bit of a limitation. But combining multiple sets to create multiplayer games is always an option. But here's the thing. For whichever ways that Kapow falls short with its multiplayer options, it makes up for with a really quality solo mode. On the reverse side of each character board is a unique solo board, and it eliminates any need for bookkeeping beyond the health dial of that automated opponent. In this solo mode, each turn will be rolling the opponent's dice and creating the highest possible combo available on their board. Those combos start to evolve pretty quickly, and we've got to effectively find a way to strike back if we're going to win a solo game. In the back of the rulebook, there is also a 2 versus 2 mode in which 2 players team up against 2 AI rivals, and with those modes factored in with the base 2-player game, Kapow brings a lot more variety than it might seem on the surface. While Dice Throne doesn't have a direct answer to those co-op and solo modes that are included in the Kapow base game, the system does have one existing expansion, Dice Throne Adventures, which is an epic dungeon-crawling collection of connected scenarios, all leading to a final confrontation with the Mad King. And if that wasn't enough, there's another co-op expansion coming in 2024 called Dice Throne Missions, which puts our heroes in one-off scenarios against the villains of the Marvel Universe. Both of these expansions have options to play solo. Of course, the reverse side of this coin is that it's not cheap to get all of this Dice Throne content, so you've really got to love that core experience to get the most out of those expansions. Kapow doesn't really have a counter to Dice Throne Adventures and Missions, but I could easily see this system expanding in any number of ways, one of which we'll get to at the end of this video. But what Kapow does have is those wonderful modular dice. Anyone who has ever sat down to play games with me has probably had to hear me gush about Rattlebones, which was the very first game to use customizable dice as a core mechanic. And I am beyond thrilled that there's now a dice fighting game that uses these wonderful little cubes. Not only that, but the fact that there's only a handful of them in the game means that players are rushing to be the first to grab an extra one and populate it with the combo-tastic size that they think will lead them to victory. I love these dice, almost more than anything in the entire world of board gaming, and this unique factor tops just about anything that Dice Throne brings to the table. And the way these modular dice talk to the other elements of the game really helps to give a solid sense of momentum from beginning to end. We can literally see and feel these super powerful entities building up their unstoppable forces until one completely obliterates the other. Damage in the game usually starts with 2 or 3 hits being delivered, but by the time these heroes are in the full swing of things, they're adding in kickers and multipliers, which brings the final damage strike somewhere in the range of 20 or even more damage. And as soon as one player's dial hits that 0 total health, it's game over, with no chance of recovery. Now those are some really remarkable elements from Kapow's side of the debate, but Dice Throne has one ace in its pocket that is the most explosive element that either game can offer, and that is the ultimate. Rolling all 6s often seems to be a near impossible feat, and when it does happen, the damage literally shakes the foundation of the entire battle. It's not an attack that we build up to. It's possible to hit an ultimate in the first turn of the game. Kind of like Randy Orton hitting his iconic RKO out of nowhere. And the ultimates happen just rarely enough that one does happen on the table. It often makes players explode out of their seats. It really is just that exciting. So those are the 3 unique factors of Kapow and Dice Throne. If you've played these games and think that there's some factor that we left out of this segment, make sure to let us know in the comments of this video. And now, we'll throw up one final transition, and then it's time to talk about which of these games my children will prefer to play more than the other. You might be able to tell that I think that both of these games are pretty great, but there's only one of these games that my older daughter, my big bean, is willing to play. If you watched our Dice Throne Quick Start for Kids video, you saw that Harriet absolutely became smitten with Psylocke. And that's not a Marvel thing. She hasn't read those graphic novels, and she hasn't seen this character in any other setting. She just looked at this one hero and said, That's the one for me. She saw herself reflected in Psylocke. On the other hand, I've attempted to introduce her to Kapow on several occasions, and each time it was met with a flat-out, resounding no, and on the last time she explained why. She said,
"There's no one for me to play in this game."
And what she meant by that is that there's not a single character in this game that reflected something back to her about herself. Going further, she also pointed out that the artwork of the game was telling her that the game itself didn't want her to be playing. It was excluding her in its very presentation, and I'm gonna be honest, I did not expect that reaction from her. I saw a superhero dice battling game, and knowing that she already liked one superhero dice battling game, I thought it would be a pretty easy transition to carry over that excitement from one game to the other. So I played this game with my wife and discussed that interaction with my older daughter with her, and while she really liked the artwork, she pointed out that most of the women in the game are mostly presented in a hyper-sexualized way. And in her opinion, she felt that this game was primarily targeted towards a male audience. And I didn't initially see that because I'm me. And this is probably what made my daughter feel so uncomfortable, so unseen by this game. I think I've probably rambled enough about this topic for now, but let's leave things today. Let's wrap things up with one final thought. Wise Wizard Games has recently announced a new publishing imprint, a separate brand called Wacky Wizard Games that's committed specifically to a younger audience. We're talking a kid-friendly version of Star Realms, a super accessible party game, and an adorable cat game called Pack the Essentials. I think that a retooled Kapow could really soar under that Wacky Wizards banner. It's already a very accessible system, maybe even easier to jump into than Dice Throne. The reading comprehension might need to be reduced a bit, and certainly the artwork needs a more inclusive approach. But give me an easily digestible version of Kapow with non-male presenting heroes that are meant to appeal to non-males, and I'll bet that my children will eat that game up. So I think that brings us to the end of this video. If you have any questions about Dice Throne or Kapow or any of the thoughts that we've shared in this video, make sure to let us know in the comments down below. Or come and join us in the Family Tabletop Community Discord server, which is linked in the description of this video. We'd love to have you join us there, where we are often chatting with Andrew and Anitra from the Family Gamers, and we recently even just had Dr. Brian McDonald of Brains on Games join us. Thank you so much for watching this video. We'll be back again soon, and until next time, whether you've got little players or big players, make sure that you keep playing games that make your thumbs go way up. Bye for now.